My name is Kelly, and I was born in Stuttgart, Germany, in a house that was never truly a home. It sat on the edge of the city like a stone sentinel, old and cold, with ivy crawling up its sides as though it wanted to strangle the place from the outside. The house creaked at night, the walls absorbed whispers, and the air was always heavy, as though it carried secrets it refused to release. People often told me it was beautiful, that old-world kind of charm with tall ceilings and arched doorways, but for me it was a cage. Every time I stepped through its carved wooden doors, I felt the weight of judgment pressing down, most of it in the form of my mother's sharp voice. That night, I sat at the long oak dining table, staring at the patterns carved into the wood, trying to steady my breathing. The chandelier above us swayed lightly, crystals catching the dim light and scattering it across the walls like knives of glass. My sister, Anna, was home for the weekend from Berlin. She had arrived in her polished black car, wearing a silk blouse that screamed money and a diamond on her finger that could probably pay off the debts I'd been drowning in. My mother beamed at her like she was some kind of queen returning to her palace. I sat across from them, the forgotten child, the disappointment. Dinner was quiet at first, me pushing potatoes around my plate, my father sipping silently at his wine, and Anna filling the silence with stories of her latest projects, her husband's career, their glamorous life along the spree. Every word that fell from her lips was coded in success, and every nod from my mother was a knife sliding between my ribs. When Anna finally paused, my mother turned to me. Her eyes narrowed, her lips curled, and then she spat the words that had been hanging over me for years. "You'll never be as successful as your sister." It wasn't the first time she had said it, but this time, something snapped. My chest tightened, my hands trembled against the table, and I felt the blood rush to my face. I stood up so quickly my chair screeched across the floor, the sound loud and violent in the dead room. My heart pounded, but my voice came out sharp and clear, slicing through the air. "Then ask her for the $55,000. The words landed like a gunshot. The room went silent. My father's wineglass froze halfway to his lips, Anna's fork clattered against her plate, and my mother's eyes widened before narrowing into something darker. For the first time in my life, I had managed to stun them into silence. Anna tried to look away, but I caught her flinch. She knew what I meant. She knew exactly what I was referring to. The money I had begged for when my business was collapsing, when I was drowning in overdue bills and threatening phone calls. She had looked at me then with her cool banker's smile and said, "I'm sorry, Kelly, but I can't risk my savings on your chaos." My own sister, with her piles of cash and her wealthy husband, couldn't spare $55,000 to help me. But she had no problem buying a necklace worth twice that. That night at the table, my anger finally sharpened into something new, something that tasted like revenge. I stared at Anna, let her see the hatred in my eyes, and for once she didn't look so perfect. Her polished surface cracked, if only for a moment. I sat back down slowly, deliberately, my hands still trembling but my voice steady as steel. "You know, Mom," I said, my tone low and venomous, "success isn't measured by applause or by fancy dinners in Berlin. It's measured by power. And one day, I'll have more power than all of you combined. You'll wish you had treated me differently." My father shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't intervene. He never did. He was a man who hid behind silence, letting my mother's cruelty and Anna's arrogance fill the house. He had money, of course. Old investments, properties, assets he never shared with me. But I wasn't asking anymore. I was done asking. The silence stretched until it felt unbearable. My mother finally broke it, her voice sharp but laced with something I hadn't heard before, fear. "Sit down, Kelly. Don't make a scene." But I had already made a scene, and I wanted more. I wanted her to choke on every word she had ever thrown at me. I wanted Anna to know that her polished life would not protect her forever. And most of all, I wanted to prove them wrong. Later that night, lying in my childhood bedroom, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, I replayed the moment again and again. The way their eyes widened. The way the air froze. I tasted it like victory, but it wasn't enough. It was just the beginning. In that cold room, surrounded by relics of my forgotten childhood, I made myself a promise. I would not just survive, I would rise. I would take what I was owed, with interest. I would claw my way to the kind of success that would make them bow their heads when they spoke my name. And when I had it, I wouldn't just walk away. No, I would make them pay for every insult, every dismissal, every door they had slammed in my face. Stuttgart had raised me, but it had also chained me. That house was a tomb, but one day it would stand as a monument to what I had overcome. My revenge would not come quietly. It would be loud, ruthless, and unforgettable. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not a soft smile, but a hard one, the kind that carried teeth. Because now I understood what I had to do. And God help anyone who tried to stand in my way. Munich was a city that pulsed with money. The wide boulevards glittered at night with expensive cars, and the scent of power clung to every glass tower. When I first stepped off the train and dragged my suitcase through Marienplatz, I didn't come here for beauty or culture. I came here for opportunity, the kind that could buy me revenge and keep me fed with the aggression I'd been carrying since Stuttgart. My rage had no outlet yet, but I knew the right man, with the right weakness, could help me turn anger into strategy. That was when I met David. He was an American, loud but polished, with a laugh that drew people in and a wallet that made them stay. We were introduced at a networking event hosted in a hotel that dripped with wealth, gold chandeliers, champagne towers, silk dresses brushing against Italian shoes. I wore a black dress that hugged me like armor, and I knew I stood out in the room not because of money, but because of hunger. Real hunger. David saw it too. He leaned close that night, his cologne sharp, his accent unmistakable. "Kelly," he said, his smile wide, "I'll back you with £50,000 if you trust me. I see potential in you." His hand lingered on mine, the gesture both an offer and a warning. But trust? That was a currency I no longer carried. I'd learned the hard way that trust was a blade people pressed against your throat. My sister had taught me that. My mother had carved it into me. And so, when David spoke of money, I didn't hear generosity. I heard leverage. He wanted me tied to him, indebted, owing him both pounds and pieces of myself. I smiled back, because predators recognize their own. £50,000 sounds like a start, I said, my tone sweet, my eyes sharp. He laughed as though I had charmed him, but I knew I had unsettled him. He was used to women swooning at the mention of money. I wasn't swooning, I was calculating. Munich gave me another ally, though I didn't call him that. Marcus. He was a lawyer from Hamburg who moved through the world with a crooked smile and a briefcase full of lies. We met in a cafe near Odeonsplatz, where he ordered espresso, like it was the only thing keeping him alive. Marcus wasn't handsome in the traditional sense, but he had a slickness to him, like oil sliding across water. He told me the courts weren't about truth. They were about power. "Kelly," he said, his voice low, "with the right leverage, you can bend the law like steel. Justice is for fools. Victory is for the ruthless." I listened, sipping my coffee slowly, memorizing every word. He didn't know it yet, but he was giving me exactly what I needed, confirmation that the world wasn't fair, that rules were illusions. And if rules were illusions, then I had every right to break them in pursuit of what I wanted. Revenge was no longer just a fantasy I whispered to myself in the dark. With David's money and Marcus's knowledge, it was becoming a blueprint. But here's the thing about men like them. They thought they were the hunters. They thought I was prey, pretty, ambitious, and desperate enough to cling to their promises. They didn't realize I had no intention of being owned. I began playing them against each other. To David, I presented myself as someone who needed legal advice, dropping Marcus's name with casual indifference. To Marcus, I mentioned an American investor who believed in me, one willing to throw pounds into my hands if I asked. Both men puffed up with ego, wanting to outdo the other. I fed them just enough truth to keep them circling, but never enough to let them hold me down. It was intoxicating, the way power began to shift into my orbit. For the first time in years, I felt the balance tilt toward me. When David invited me to dinner in a glass-walled restaurant overlooking the Isar, He tried once again to press his advantage. Kelly, let me handle the risks. Take the money. Start over. We'll do this together. I leaned forward, close enough for him to smell my defiance. I don't need a savior, I whispered. I need an investor who knows when to shut up and write the check. The flicker in his eyes was priceless. Anger, attraction, confusion, all tangled together. I had thrown his own arrogance back at him, and it thrilled me. With Marcus, the game was darker. He hinted at favors, at backroom deals, at court cases that could be adjusted for the right price. His words dripped with corruption, and every drop was a reminder that I didn't need to play fair anymore. Kelly, he said one night, you remind me of a wolf. You'll never be satisfied until you've torn something apart. He was right. I wanted to tear Anna's perfect little life apart, piece by piece, until she knew what it felt like to choke on the same helplessness she had handed me. The men thought they were using me, but the truth was sharper. They were tools. Tools I would use to build my empire of revenge. David's money would fuel it. Marcus's lies would protect it. And I would be the one pulling every string. But don't mistake my calculation for calm. Beneath every smile, beneath every word of charm, I was fire. Aggression burned through my veins. At night, when I stared at the Munich skyline glittering in the distance, I imagined the day I would stand over my enemies, my mother, Anna, even men like David and Marcus, and remind them that Kelly was not the failure they had once dismissed. Munich had given me more than money and promises. It had given me clarity. The world was not divided between the successful and the failures. It was divided between the predators and the prey. And I had chosen my side. As I left Marcus one evening, the echo of his laugh following me into the cold night air, I looked up at the sky and made another vow. If these men thought they could bind me with pounds or laws, they were gravely mistaken. I would take their promises, twist them into weapons, and when the time was right, I would turn those weapons on them too. Because revenge is not satisfied with half measures. And I wasn't here to survive anymore. I was here to win. Berlin was a different beast than Stuttgart or Munich. If Stuttgart was a cage and Munich a chessboard, then Berlin was a battlefield. The city hummed with noise and ambition, a place where power was traded in whispers behind velvet curtains and in deals inked over champagne. I didn't return for forgiveness, and I certainly didn't return for family. I came back for war. Anna had built her empire here, brick by smug brick. She lived in a glass-walled apartment overlooking the Spree, dined with politicians and CEOs, and posed for photographs that made her look like a queen draped in modern finery. To the outside world, she was untouchable. Perfect career, perfect husband, perfect life. But I knew the cracks in her foundation. I knew the secrets she buried, the whispers she prayed would never surface. And I was ready to rip them open with both hands. The invitation came in the form of a cream-colored envelope, embossed with golden letters, a gala for the future of German finance, hosted at Charlottenburg Palace. It was Anna's territory. She would be there, shining like the jewel she pretended to be. For most, the palace was a dream of chandeliers, music, and wealth. For me, it was the perfect stage for destruction. That evening, I slipped into a crimson dress that clung to my body like armor. It wasn't just fashion. It was a warning sign, a declaration that I wasn't here to blend in. My heels clicked across the marble floor as I entered the palace, my chin raised high, every inch of me radiating the aggression I had sharpened into a weapon. Heads turned, but I didn't care. Let them look. Let them wonder. And then I saw her. Anna stood near the grand staircase, a glass of champagne in her manicured hand, her laughter ringing like silver bells. She wore diamonds around her neck and arrogance on her face. My mother would have been proud of her. No, more than proud, worshipful. That thought fueled the fire in my chest. I crossed the room with deliberate steps, each one a drumbeat of vengeance. When I reached her, I leaned close enough for her to smell the fury burning in my veins. "Remember the $55,000? I whispered, my lips curling. "Tonight, you'll pay me double, or I'll let your friends know exactly how you earned it." Her face drained of color in an instant. She tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in her throat. Her husband glanced at us curiously, but Anna waved him away, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. "Kelly," she hissed, her voice low, "don't make a scene." I smiled, sharp and merciless. "A scene is exactly what I'll make if you don't cooperate. You see all these people?" I gestured to the glittering crowd around us. "They think you're respectable. They think you're clean. But I know better. And I'll make sure they know too." Her hand trembled, a bead of champagne sliding over her knuckle. For the first time in years, I had her cornered. My perfect sister, reduced to fear. We stepped aside, into the shadow of a marble pillar. Anna's mask cracked as she leaned closer, her voice sharp with panic. "You wouldn't dare." I let out a low laugh, venom dripping from every word. "Dare? Anna, I live for daring. You left me drowning while you swam in money. Now you'll pay me $110,000, and you'll pay it tonight. If you don't, I'll shred your reputation right here in the heart of Berlin." Her lips pressed into a thin line, fury burning in her eyes. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I snapped, leaning in so close she could feel my breath. "This makes me dangerous. And dangerous is far more valuable than powerful." The rest of the night was a blur of music and whispered threats. I lingered near her, making sure she couldn't escape me, watching her confidence crumble like glass under a hammer. Every smile she forced for her colleagues was tight, every laugh brittle. And I reveled in it. By midnight, Anna surrendered. In a private corner of the palace, she handed me her phone, her trembling fingers logging into her accounts. $110,000, I reminded her, my tone cold. She wired it, her shoulders stiff, her jaw clenched. The numbers shifted on the screen, and just like that, I had doubled the amount she had once refused me. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about watching her bend, about proving that the sister who had once mocked me, who had denied me help when I was desperate, could be brought to her knees. When the transfer was complete, I handed the phone back with a smile that dripped with poison. "Thank you, Anna. You always did look better when you were losing." Her eyes burned with hatred, but she said nothing. She couldn't. Not in front of the crowd. Not with her reputation hanging by a thread. I walked out of Charlottenburg Palace that night with the kind of satisfaction no currency could buy. The city lights reflected off the spree as I made my way back to my apartment, the sound of Berlin alive around me. But inside, there was only silence, the silence of victory, sharp and sweet. Still, I knew this was only the beginning. Money was a tool, not the goal. I had made her pay once, but I wanted more. I wanted to dismantle her world piece by piece, until she knew what it was to be stripped bare. Until she understood that Kelly, the sister she had underestimated, mocked, and betrayed, wasn't finished yet. Berlin had taught me something Stuttgart never could. Revenge doesn't just heal old wounds, it fuels new ambitions. The aggression that had carried me this far was no longer just a fire inside me. It was an inferno, and it wouldn't be satisfied with a single victory. Anna thought she had seen the worst of me that night at the gala. She was wrong. The reckoning had only just begun. By the time the gala ended, I walked out of Charlottenburg Palace with $110,000 transferred into my account. My crimson dress trailed behind me like a banner of victory, and I didn't look back. Inside, Anna was shattered. Her husband's face had twisted in fury, and her polished friends whispered behind their champagne glasses. My sister, the untouchable star of Berlin's finance elite, had been reduced to a trembling figure in the corner of her own kingdom. And I had done it with a few whispered threats and a steel will sharpened by years of humiliation. But revenge has a strange taste. Sweet at first, like honey, but quickly it hardens into something bitter if left unfinished. $110,000 wasn't enough. I hadn't fought through years of rejection, sneers, and betrayal just to take my sister's money and walk away. No. I wanted more. I wanted her reputation burned to ashes, her marriage splintered, her name cursed in every hallway where it had once been praised. That's where Marcus came in. He smiled like a fox when I told him what I wanted. Financial ruin? He asked, sipping his espresso in his Hamburg office.
Easy.
The law is a net, Kelly. You just have to know how to tighten it around the right prey. With Marcus, I drafted contracts, filed claims, and set up paperwork that tangled Anna's finances like a web spun by a spider who enjoyed watching her victims twitch. We found debts she had hidden, investments she had concealed even from her husband, and used them like knives. He was only too eager to help once I told him I'd cut him in for a slice of the winnings. Marcus loved destruction as much as I did, though he dressed it in suits and legal jargon. At the same time, David, the American investor with his smooth voice and promises of endless wealth, wired more pounds into my account than he had ever intended. He thought he was controlling me, thought his money bought my loyalty. But I used his greed against him. I fed him stories about projects, whispered opportunities in Berlin, hinted at doors I could open with Anna's connections. He transferred money to me, thinking it was an investment.
It was.
But the return wouldn't go to him. It would go to me alone. Soon, Anna's financial fortress began to crack. Her husband discovered the hidden accounts. Business partners pulled out of deals, their confidence shaken by rumors I had carefully planted. At dinner parties, her name began to slip from lips in tones of caution rather than admiration. And every time she tried to fix the mess, she found another knot tied by Marcus's careful hands and my ruthless direction. But the true reckoning wasn't just in Berlin. It was back in Stuttgart, in the house where my mother once screamed that I would never be as successful as my sister. One gray morning, I stood before that old stone house, looking up at the windows where I had once sat as a girl, believing her. The air was sharp with winter, and my breath curled like smoke as I whispered to the empty walls, "Do you see me now?" I imagined my mother inside, her voice echoing as it always had, "You'll never be as successful as Anna." But now those words rang hollow, broken. I had bent Anna to my will. I had taken her money, her pride, and soon her reputation. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the executioner. Standing there, I didn't feel peace. I felt hunger. Aggression still burned in my chest, fueling me. My revenge against Anna was only one part of it. My mother's scorn still echoed, and my father's silence still enraged me. They had all written me off as the family's failure, the one who would never amount to anything. Now I wanted them to see the empire I was building, forged from their dismissal. Germany was mine now. I had carved my place in it with blood, scars, and triumph. From Stuttgart's cold house, to Munich's glittering towers, to Berlin's golden palaces, I had taken what I was owed and more. And I wasn't finished. Because revenge is never finished. It grows, it spreads, and it whispers in your ear that there is always more to take, more to burn, more to destroy. I had tasted victory, but the aggression that lived inside me wouldn't let me stop. I thought of America then, of David and his endless resources, of the world he represented. If America thought it could buy me, chain me, or use me, it was wrong. If America thought it could break me, it would need more than money. It would need firepower greater than the fury I carried in my veins. I turned from the house in Stuttgart and walked down the icy street, my heels clicking like gunshots against the pavement. I didn't flinch. I didn't soften. I was done being the girl who begged for help. I was the woman who took what she wanted, no matter the cost. And the world, whether it was Germany, America, or anywhere else, would soon learn Kelly wasn't someone to be pitied. Kelly was someone to be feared.